Rich from Mountain Slider Garage. Welcome to this episode. Today we're going to go through the removal and install of the QRS secondary clutch on the Skidoo snowmobiles. Skidoo's been using this setup like this since I think the 2008 XP800 when it came out, with the jack shaft attached to the secondary clutch like this. We really kind of hated it when it first came out because getting to your secondary clutch and making adjustments, pulling the whole jack shaft out to do that was really a pain. You know, it's not like Polaris and Arctic Cat where you just pull a bolt out of there, this slides off the splines, and then you can service your clutch with leaving your jack shaft in. That makes it a lot easier. Kind of like that way to do that. But anyway, this is a way to do it. If you're new to Skidoo, or you've never done this before, we're going to show you how to do it. We're going to go through a really kind of basic through every step, and then we'll show you how to do that. And it's not a terribly hard thing to do, and you can do it. It really only takes 10 or 15 minutes to do it. So it's once you know how to do it, you can do it pretty quickly. But the tools we're going to need some tools. We're going to need a 15 millimeter socket, probably with some kind of an extender on it. You're going to need some kind of 13 millimeter box end wrench or a little 1/4 inch drive 13 millimeter socket like that. Some kind of a screwdriver to pop the rubber cap off this chain case. And then you don't have to have a magnet, but it helps to have a magnet so you're not dropping some of the nuts or bolts down inside the engine compartment. So those are the things that you'll need. The last thing that you're going to need is a special jack shaft tool. They call it the QRS gear retaining tool. SPI sells them. There's a few companies that sell them. That actually screws on this end of your jack shaft. Once you take this bolt out, it helps hold this upper gear in place in your chain case, and we'll go over that and show you how that works too. But just so you don't have to take your chain case apart to when you pull that nut off and you pull the jack shaft out of your chain case. But let's go over to the sled. We'll pull the shaft out, and then we'll show you how to put it back in. Okay, we're going to show you how to take the secondary clutch and jack shaft out of the Skidoo. We're going to do this as basic as possible for someone who's never done this before, or maybe never seen it before. You're new to Skidoo or something, so we're going to go over every little possible part of this removal. So, I mean, you know how to take your side panels off. Next thing we need to do, you need to take your clutch cover out. If you have one of these, this is the sensor for the belt temperature right here. You need to pull both that sensor out, the plug off that goes on there, and then your belt cover off. And you're going to need this tool right here. This tool, you're going to need that, or to loosen your belt and take your belt off with. So if you've never taken your belt off your Skidoo before, there's a little threaded part right in there. Tighten that down so you can get your belt off this, and just see up here it's opening up your sheaths, so your belt's kind of dropping down in there, so it loosens up your belt, so it easily just pulls out just like that. Okay, now the thing that we want to get to, there is on the back of the jack shaft, back in here, there's a bearing. The jack shaft's this shaft right here. There's a bearing that rides in this bearing tower right here, and this retainer here holds that bearing in place. There's a 13 millimeter nut right there that we need to take off. It's easier to do this if you either have a ratcheting box end wrench like this or a pivoting head 13 millimeter socket like this. That way you can get it in there and you can unscrew that bolt really easily. You get back down in there, you can see that I'm getting my wrench on there. And we'll just unscrew that bolt. Now what you don't want to do when you take this off, you don't want to lose that nut on there down inside your engine compartment. So once it gets loose enough, that's a nylon threaded lock nut. So you can go in there and you just get your fingers in there and just unscrew it the rest of the way once the nylon threaded lock nut has let loose of the bolt. And then just be really careful when that comes off, you don't drop it in. Then that's the bracket that holds the bearing in, the bearing retainer bracket that we need off this side. So this side's ready to take off. Now we're going to need to go over to the exhaust side and take the exhaust side apart. Okay, now we're around on the exhaust side. We're going to pull the side panel off this. Now I have an aftermarket muffler on mine. What we want to do here, there's this rubber cap right here with this clear tube in it. We need to take that cap off. That's the cap that holds where you can access the bolt to your upper chain case bolt. And with mine, I'm going to have to get this temperature sensor out of here. that's kind of going to be in my way where I'm going to be working. So you probably won't have that unless, depending on what kind of aftermarket muffler you have, if you have one. But take that out of there. One part of this that you probably want to do that's helpful, especially when you put this back together, is you want to loosen your chain that's in your chain case just a little bit. That'll be easier to slide your jack shaft in and out of the upper gear. So this is a little retaining ring that holds this bolt in place where you adjust your jack shaft. This is the tool that I use to loosen my belt. It's going to fit in some threads right here on the head of this bolt and just loosen that. That'll loosen your chain enough it'll be easy to slide your jack shaft in and out of the upper gear. So right here, that's our bolt that we need to take out that holds our upper gear on our chain for our chain case. And to do that, to loosen that, makes it a lot easier if you set your parking brake. That way our jack shaft doesn't turn when we loosen this. So we're just going to loosen that bolt. The last thing you want to do is drop the bolt or the washer down in your chain case. So if you get a little magnet like that, just grab onto your washer. That way you don't risk dropping it down in there. So if we look in there now, we can see the middle part of this is our jack shaft, kind of like this. This is a chain. This is the center in here. Your jack shaft's going to go in there. This is your gear you're looking at, and then the chain goes around it like this. That's what you're looking at in there. This is the tool. This is called the gear removal or jack shaft removal tool or something like that for Skidoo QRS. This is going to screw in our jack shaft, and what this is going to do, if we just pull our jack shaft out, this chain's going to fall down on your chain case right there, and you're going to have to pull your whole chain case apart to put your gear back in place. So what this does, you put this in here, you screw this end into your jack shaft, that goes in there. When you pull your jack shaft out, this stays in there, and that holds this upper gear in place. And then when you put this back together, you screw your jack shaft on there and push this back through here, and it pulls your jack shaft back where it's supposed to be. So we're going to screw this into our jack shaft. Make sure that's screwed in all the way. Okay, now the last thing we got to do to pull this out, this whole thing, the jack shaft and the clutch, is going to come out the other side. Tap on this right here. Our jack shaft. See, our jack shaft is loosed over here. Now we've got that tool in there. We want to unscrew the tool, but we want to make sure we leave the tool in place. On this side, we're going to grab the tool with our fingers on the exhaust side, and then we're going to rotate this, which is going to unscrew the tool from the jack shaft. Now that that's off, we can pull that out of place. Now what we want to do, we want to make sure our tool stays in place right there. You don't want to take that out. So if you take that out, your chain and your gear are going to drop down there. You're going to have to take everything apart to get it out. All right, so now one of the things we're going to do here when we pull the clutch out of this and put it back in that I highly recommend is on the back side of your clutch, you have these 4 Torx bit heads that hold the helix on. I'm going to recommend you change those out for a hex head, and I'll tell you why that is. For one, the hex head is just way easier to get off than a Torx bit. You got to heat these up with a really good, strong propane torch so it loosens all the Loctite on them. Loosen those up. A lot of times the Torx head will strip or the head will break off. The hex head is just so much easier to get on and off. The other thing this allows you to do, it allows you to pull your helix and spring without having to pull the entire shaft out. So I will show you why that is. If you look down in here, I already have this snowmobile with the hex-headed bolts on it. You can see the hex-headed bolt, one right there. So if you put your tool on like this, you have those hex-headed bolts. You can easily get a wrench in back here on those bolts and take those bolts like this out anywhere without having to pull the whole jack shaft out. That allows you to pull the helix off, the spring off, leave the jack shaft in place. Just makes the whole process a lot easier with those hex-headed bolts on there. Now that's a 10.9 grade metric bolt. The thread pitch on it is 8mm 1.25 bolt. So you can go get those. I've got them at Ace Hardware, and I would highly recommend you putting those on just because it makes this clutch maintenance a lot easier on your secondary clutch because you don't have to pull the jack shaft out when you do that. Now before we put our jack shaft back in, we have to remember that this end of the jack shaft has to screw into the tool that we left in place that goes through our chain case. And that tool, you can see right here, the end of the threads are just right there. And we're going to have to screw our jack shaft into that. Okay, now we're going to put our jack shaft and our clutch back in. Remember, the jack shaft goes through this tower right here that holds our jack shaft bearing. We're going to slide this through here. We're going to try and aim it toward the threads on the tool that we just showed you. You don't want to push it out, so it's easy to have someone else help you. So if you reach across the other side to where the tool is, rotate the jack shaft and screw it into the tool. Now if we show you the other side here, you see that the jack shaft there where the spline's at is screwed into my aluminum tool right there next to it. It's screwed all the way in, so that's where we want to be. Okay, the next part of this, it's kind of difficult, is you got to kind of feed this back through to the other side. And you got to kind of work the bearing into the bearing tower, and then you also have to get the splines on the jack shaft to engage with the splines on your top sprocket on the other side. Now on this side, you have to work the upper gear here, your chain case, onto the splines on the other side. And it's a little bit easier to do if you have someone on the other side move the jack shaft back and forth a little bit. Then you can kind of push on the gear with a screwdriver like this. And then you can usually get them to engage enough that you can get it to go in all the way. Okay, now we wiggle up the other side a little bit. And I think we've got this. So we're going to unscrew our tool here. We're going to take a look in there. See that our jack shaft right here is pretty much engaged in all the teeth on both the jack shaft and the sprocket. In case we're going to put our bolt back in. I use blue Loctite. Some people recommend using red. Just put a decent amount on there. Then we're going to screw that all the way down in. And then we're going to torque that thing down. I still have my emergency brake on, so my jack shaft isn't going to turn. This is torqued to 35 foot-pounds. There we go. Now we'll work our little plastic cap back in there. I'll put my exhaust probe back in here. The other now we need to tighten our chain case back up to where it was in our chain. And I had unscrewed mine 2 1/2 turns or 1 full turn. So I'm going to go 1/2 turn, and then 1/2 turn, and then I'm going to put my lock key back in it, and that's going to keep it from unscrewing. So we have everything on this side hooked up the way we need it. Now we'll go back over to the other side. We'll put our bearing retaining bracket back in, put our belt back on, our cover on and everything, and then we'll be good to go ride this thing. All right, now we're going to put our bearing retaining bracket back in. The same place we took it out. Our bolt back on. Remember, this has the nylon locking bolt, so there's no real torque for that. You tighten it down just a decent amount, and that nylon will lock that bolt into place to keep it from unscrewing. Just got to be careful not to drop that bolt down there when you're trying to get it started on the threads. We're going to take our swivel head ratchet. If you look in here, you can pretty much see the bottom of the bearing right here is pretty much flush with this outside edge of our bearing retaining tower. So that's about what it should look like when it goes back in. If everything's back together correctly, the retaining bracket fits flush against the tower, the bearing fits flush against the tower down here, and everything should be good just like that. All right, so now we're going to put our belt back on this machine. We'll adjust it to have the right belt deflection. We'll put the belt cover back on, the side panel back on, and then she's going to be ready for the snow when it gets here in the next couple of weeks. So that's how you do it. That's how you pull your secondary clutch in and out. Now we have those bolts on the back side of our clutch, so it'll be easier to change our helix and spring if we want to without having to take our jack shaft off the next time. And we'll make another video show you how to do that. It's pretty simple if you've never pulled the helix and spring out of your QRS secondary before with your jack shaft in the machine. I'll make a little video about that, about how to do that. Look for it. It should be QRS secondary clutch, spring, and helix removal. So there you go. Signing off from Mountain Slater Garage. Hope you enjoy the videos. If you do, like them, share them, and subscribe to the YouTube page. And we'll see you next time at Mountain Slater Garage.